everyone, I am back, and I apologize for not having a whole lot of wrestling-related content for you in recent weeks, but things have been very hectic for both good and bad reasons. I will give you those updates, and also state right here at the beginning that this video will predominantly be about professional wrestling, specifically a lot of the big shows that are happening this weekend, and some updates on the current status of both AEW and WWE. I'm going to talk about both of those. There will be some Godzilla discussion, but I'm going to save that for the very end because there are some things I want to say about the recent drama surrounding the new Godzilla Kong movie that kind of took the kaiju fandom online, kind of drove everybody crazy. So I have a lot of things I want to say about that, but I'm going to save that for the end. This is going to be predominantly a wrestling video. So things have been very busy on my end for both good and bad reasons. The podcast that I do with Eric Clancy, Weekday Warriors of Wrestling, we have put that on hold for now, mainly because of major updates in Eric's life. Very positive things, I shall say, but he's not available at the moment, so we're putting the show on hold for now. And then once he's at a place where he can do shows again, we'll be more than happy to do that. Of course, I'm about to get completely steamrolled with a baby on the way and everything else, so who knows. But we're going to try and get back to doing things, but it's just things are very hectic right now for both of us. On my end of things, if you follow me on Twitter, you already know this, I've already said it. My mother passed away a few weeks ago, which wasn't a surprise, but it still kind of hit like a ton of bricks. And we're still, as a family, we're still working to try and process everything and get everything, just kind of move on from this very tragic event that's hit us all pretty hard. Her funeral service is on Saturday, so that's going to prevent me from watching obviously, I'm not going to be watching wrestling this weekend. I'm going to be spending time with the family and honoring the life of my mother. So got more important things to deal with on that front. So I just ask for everyone's best wishes and well wishes and keep us in your thoughts and prayers during a very, very tough time for all of us. But in better news, my wife and I purchased a house. We're going to be moving into that the weekend of June 3rd to the 6th is going to be our moving days. And that's going to be much better. I've already picked out a room in the new house to film in because I do not like this room. I really don't. This was the only room that was available to me after I got married and my wife and I moved in together. So this was always a temporary filming room, temporary solution for production. It's of all the filming locations I've had, this one was definitely my least favorite. I just was never a fan of this room, and it's obviously been a cluttered mess the entire time I've had it, but that will be no more. I will have my own office, my own room, and I can use it to film to my heart's content and get a lot of other stuff done. So that will be a major plus. Looking forward to that. Also, baby on the way. She's due in July, so that's going to be that's obviously going to cut into the film production. I said this months ago, but it's we're getting close to the tail end here, and that's going to be it's going to be something, to say the least. So you might not be seeing a whole heck of a lot of me throughout the summer, but I am going to be working towards getting back on here and making content and commenting on the crazy world of professional wrestling and Godzilla and everything else that I like to talk about. So I think that's enough of an intro. Let's get into the pro wrestling side of things. Now, I wasn't going to talk about this initially, but it kind of broke yesterday, early today, with a lot of people talking about it. Hulk Hogan did an interview where he expressed interest in wrestling Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 40. Now, Hogan has expressed interest in wrestling Austin before. Those plans never materialized. I remember Hogan even came out on Raw in 2005 and did a promo where he talked about wanting to face Stone Cold Steve Austin, and nothing came of it. Absolutely nothing came of it. So, look, I understand that Hogan Austin is kind of the ultimate WWF dream match. I mean, when I did my video on the top WWE Championship title reigns of all time, number 1 and 2 were Hogan and Austin. So they're, from my perspective, at least as a fan, they're the two greatest WWE champions of all time. A match between the two, I think, sounds exciting. I think it sounds interesting because of who it is, and they've never worked with each other before in a meaningful, big main event caliber match. And I'll even say this. if there are any two guys that you could put together and they could get away with doing almost nothing, given their limitations, Hogan and Austin are probably the two guys that could get away with it, and fans would walk away satisfied. That said, I remember Hogan's last pay-per-view match, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, his last pay-per-view match was the match he had with Sting at Bound for Glory 2011, and this was over a decade ago. And he couldn't really bump, couldn't do the leg drop. His back was killing him. It was obvious when Sting put him in the Scorpion Deathlock at the end. Hogan couldn't even stay bent backwards to take the full move because he was in excruciating pain. And that was over a decade ago. And Hogan's health has only declined since then. And Austin's last pay-per-view match was the match with Kevin Owens, where he worked with a guy who, A, was a no-DQ match, and 2, he worked with a guy that could bump around for him and take all the bumps and kind of make the match work in that regard. And they gave the fans exactly what they wanted, and it worked for what it needed to be. But Austin was still very, very limited, and given his neck, there's certain bumps he just can't take. And that's just how it is. So, and Hogan, the Bound for Glory match, that match worked because he was in there with Sting, and the crowd reaction was so strong that Sting and Hogan were able to just kind of go with it and make it work, in that specific situation. But here, it's like, you put Hogan and Austin together, I can't imagine them being able to do much of anything with each other, and I'd rather not see it. If this match was going to happen, I would have preferred to get it in 2002 when Hogan came back, maybe 2003. That probably would have been the time frame to do it, but now, please don't. just please don't. Austin got his farewell. Austin got his big, with Kevin Owens, and it was nice, and it was fun. We all had a good time. No more. We're done. And Hogan never really got a proper farewell, and I understand that probably sticks in his craw a little bit, but please don't. Just don't. No more. No mas. We're done. No thank you. And I have a lot of respect for both guys as performers and what they meant to me as a young fan, because Hogan was my first guy. And Austin was the guy when I was a teenager and kind of a moody prick and, rebelled against authority. Austin was kind of the guy that I could live vicarious through. Please don't do that match now. I'm saying this as someone who's grew up a fan of both guys. Please don't do this match now. It's just, my hopes will not be very high for them being able to deliver in any kind of meaningful capacity. And again, if any two guys could probably pull it off by doing almost nothing, it's probably those two, but I'd still rather not see it. But that's my personal take. How do you all feel about having Hogan and Austin at WrestleMania 40? I mean, it would be, on paper, it's like, it's the ultimate WWE dream match, but no. My take is no. I don't know how everybody else feels. So say what you all got to say down in the comments below. And again, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new content, because you will be seeing more of me, at least for the next couple of weeks. Again, when the baby comes along, we don't know. But anyway, yeah, so that's the Hogan Austin talk. Let's go into AEW, which has been quite interesting lately with the news regarding AEW Collision, which is leaning very heavily into the WCW Nitro nostalgia, which I was having this conversation with a friend of mine. It's like, why does WCW nostalgia hit so much harder lately? I don't know what it is, but something about WCW nostalgia, the look of the Collision logo just looks like the old Nitro logo and everything, and it's like, man, something about WCW nostalgia that really hits. I don't know what it is, and I think it's because WCW got buried by WWE for so long that when the network started up and you started seeing more WCW content, it was more readily available to people. People were kind of able to judge WCW in a less biased environment where it's like, okay, here are the shows and you judge for yourself. And I think a lot of people went back and watched those shows and it's like, hey, you know what, WCW wasn't that bad all the time. And that's how I felt about it, where it's like, the way WWE painted the picture for years, you would have thought WCW was complete garbage the entire time, and they just lucked their way into winning the Monday Night Wars, because they bought up all the big names and they had nothing redeeming about them other than the big names. I'm like, nah, that's not true. That's not really true. And I think more and more people have discovered that. And I think, but man, something about WCW nostalgia that just really hits. I don't know why. But When I heard they were doing this show, Collision, the Saturday show, I immediately rolled my eyes because I'm like, look, AEW has too much content as it is. They've got Dynamite. They've got Rampage, which is probably the worst weekly wrestling show out there right now because it is so pointless. So friggin' pointless, easily skippable. They were doing AEW Dark and Dark Elevation on YouTube, which they finally dropped, which I think is a good thing. Because those were becoming increasingly pointless. If they dropped them to get ready for Collision, because it's like, look, they've got too much content as it is. And ROH, which I'm not paying for, is basically the new AEW Dark as far as when you look at the people who are on that show. And I'm like, you know what, I'm okay with that. That's fine. It's better AEW Dark, which I think is fine. And a good place for people to go that wouldn't normally get TV time on Dynamite to go and work ROH, which is probably what ROH should be AEW's NXT, basically, which is what it should be. And if they transition ROH into becoming that, I think that works just fine. But I'm still not paying for it, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, they have way too much content, and adding Collision to the mix, it's like, okay, dude, they've got to cancel Rampage. Like, they can't let that thing stand, because it's so, again, and it's a shame, because Rampage is the coolest name of the three show, Rampage, Collision, and Dynamite, but Rampage has got the coolest name, but you can't make that show work with two-hour shows every week, so I think Rampage should be dropped. I haven't heard anything about whether or not they're going to drop Rampage, but personally, I feel like the show should be dropped. And there was also some drama going on online with CM Punk, who is heavily rumored to be the flag bearer of Collision, and the thought process, or like what's rumored online, which again, take that with a grain of salt, that there's going to be kind of a loose brand split where the Elite is on Dynamite and Punk's crew is on Collision, and one's going to be the Punk show and one's going to be the Elite show, which I think is completely counterintuitive to, business sense. I think Punk versus the Elite is the match to have. I think they should have it at Wembley, which the ticket sales for that have far exceeded most people's expectations, which is great to hear. But you gotta have a killer match on there, and I think Punk and some version of Punk versus the Elite needs to happen on that show, whether it's a 6-man tag, whether it's Punk versus Omega one-on-one, whatever. That match needs to happen, and because I think it's a money match. And let's take a major negative and spin it around and turn it into one of the biggest positives in company history. Let's do that. And if Punk and the Elite are unable to work with each other, I think that's like indicative of I don't know what people having absolutely no business sense. Because if I were in the wrestling business and by the way, I am not cut out to be in the wrestling business for a multitude of reasons. One, I don't like traveling. Two, I don't like the idea of throwing my body at the ground every night of the year. And three, I'm a very I don't want to say antisocial, but I am very introverted. And the idea of going out there, performing in front of people, and then going out and hanging out with people all day just would drive me insane. I would become a serial killer by the end of it. So no, I would not work in the professional wrestling business. But if I was in the professional wrestling business, and I was in this situation where I got into a real-life fight with somebody, and it leaked online, or it became a public outburst on the show itself, and people were talking about it, I would say, okay, so this is kind of a black eye on the company right now, but let's spin it around, let's make some money with this. Because you could take that negative and turn it into a major positive. And if Punk and or the Elite are unable to recognize that, I don't know what to say to them. It's like, dude, do you know how many people would tune into that show to watch that match? There are people who will watch that match just to look for any cheap shots and potatoes and things like that. Little heavy hands and things like that. People will be looking for that chippy stuff. And the story writes itself because it was real. So you wouldn't even have to work all that hard to create something to build the match up. The match would just write itself. So I feel like that match needs to happen at Wembley, and if Collision is going to be some kind of loose brand split thing where the two don't even interact, I think that's leaving money on the table and getting Collision off to a bad start, because what's the point of bringing Punk back if he's not going to work with the Elite? I'm sure Punk can do something else and make money in other ways, but it just feels like to bring Punk back and then never mention the Elite stuff, the brawl out and all that other stuff, I think would be a huge drop ball for AEW. But that's my personal opinion. So, but it does look like, whatever issues there were in getting Punk, because that was another thing that broke online, where it's like they had Punk all set, and then there was some disagreement involving Ace Steel and whether or not he was going to be included, and that was gumming up the works. Which I'm like, I can't believe I live in a day and age where Ace Steel, the fate of Ace Steel, is the determining factor in whether or not a 2-hour weekly wrestling show will work or not. Because if they don't get Punk for Collision, that show is not going to work. It's just going to be more AEW content that's going to further dilute the brand. And I've seen it before, like WCW is a good kind of template for this, where once they introduced Thunder, things started to become watered down. Once WWE introduced Smackdown, and granted, I think WWE did a much better job of handling two-hour shows on a weekly basis, at least up until about WrestleMania 17 time. They did a much better job of handling two-hour shows weekly. Even that, like, I remember thinking back then as a kid, it's like, man, I'm not as excited for Raw because you have another show in the middle of the week, and it cuts into that excitement a little bit. So, just my personal take on it, but whenever you add more programming, you just water it down. And I'll say this, they better not ever do Battle of the Belts ever again. You want a show that is completely pointless. Battle of the Belts. And I understand they want to do a Clash of Champions style special. I'm sure Clash of Champions was the inspiration for that. And I love Clash of the Champions. Like, when I think back on my time as a wrestling fan, the shows I am most nostalgic for and I have the fondest memories of, probably Saturday Night's Main Event, Attitude Era Raw, Nitro when WCW was at its peak, so like 97 to 98, and Clash of the Champions would be another one that I was fond of. And I'd say, probably Lucha Underground too. Maybe peak TNA when they were early on Spike would be another one I have really fond memories of watching weekly, like 05, 06 TNA. But yeah, those are the shows that I look back on the most fondly as far as wrestling programming from my younger days as a wrestling fan. And Clash of the Champions was really cool, but it only works in an era where most of the programming is squash matches. So when you get Clash of Champions, it's like getting a free pay-per-view. Saturday Night's Main Event worked the exact same way. It worked because most of the wrestling programming was squash matches, so this seemed like something you had to go out of your way to see. It doesn't work in an era with a Raw and a Smackdown, and Clash of Champions doesn't work when you have a 2-hour Dynamite, a 1-hour Rampage, and all this programming on YouTube and everything else. Is like, who gives a shit? And it doesn't help that the show is predicated and built on it's all title matches, and yet no titles have changed hands in the entire history of that show. I think the TNT title, somebody won the vacant TNT title at one of the Battle of the Belts, but other than that, there have been no title changes, so why in the hell would I go out of my way to watch these shows? None of these matches have build-up meaning, and AEW also has too many belts. That's another problem. So, Battle of the Belts should never happen again. Like with Collision, it's like they need to cut down. With Collision coming in, they need to cut down. I think getting rid of Rampage, getting rid of Dark and Elevation, I think are good moves. And I think getting rid, no longer doing Battle of the Belts would be the right way to go. That's my personal opinion. I think, all right, you've got Dynamite, you've got Collision, that should be all the programming you have. And then you've got ROH kind of functioning as its own thing off to the corner, off to the side over there. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it works. I have my doubts whether or not a Saturday night show can work in today's climate because everybody goes out on Saturday, so I don't know. I have fond memories of WCW Saturday Night. I remember that show, but I also recorded it most of the time and watched it on Monday. That's kind of how I watched Saturday Night's Main Event back in the old VHS days. And if DVR was around back then, I would have DVR'd it. Because it's like, dude, I've got stuff to do on it. Even as a young kid, I was like, dude, I want to go to the movies or go to Pizza Hut or something like that. I don't want to sit at home and watch anything, even if it is wrestling. Superstars got away with it because Superstars came on in the morning, so I was just like, watch my cartoons, watch some wrestling, and then go out and do my stuff. But, I could be wrong. We'll see. We'll see how it all goes, but that's going to be a hard, tough nut to crack. If it were up to me, I would have tried to get a time slot on Sundays and maybe make Collision be kind of like the new Sunday Night Heat, where, I mean, Sunday Night Heat were great because before SmackDown came along, you had Raw, and then you wait 6 nights to watch a show that's basically a preview for Raw. And then on pay-per-views, it was basically your pre-show. You didn't have to produce a pre-show because you already had Heat lined up to be a final sell for the pay-per-view. And that was kind of neat. I was like, that was a nice little format they had there. And maybe Collision could function in a similar way where it's, the day of a pay-per-view, Collision is the pre-show to the pay-per-view. That might work. I don't know. That might have worked. But again, who knows? I don't know, I'm just spitballing ideas, playing 2020, hindsight being 2020 and armchair quarterback and all that other stuff. I didn't make these decisions. I wasn't involved in the deal, and it wasn't my money that was on the line, so who the hell knows? So that's my stance on Collision. I'm not overly optimistic for it, but based on what we saw on Dynamite this week, it looks like the show will be in Chicago. I would like to believe that they're not that stupid to announce that the show is going to be in Chicago and not have CM Punk there. I want to believe they're not that dumb to do that, because that is the ultimate throwing the banana peel in front of yourself. Like, you announce the show's in Chicago, and then Punk's not on the show in any capacity. That would be a major fail on AEW's part. So it looks like Punk's going to be there. That's my assumption. That's what I'm working off of. And I'm not even fully convinced that all the shit that we saw online wasn't Punk working us to kind of toy with us a little bit, because Punk strikes me as the kind of guy that likes to keep people on their toes and keep us guessing. So who knows? But we shall see. It'll be interesting to see where AEW goes with this new show coming up. And hopefully... I'll be honest, my biggest concern right now with AEW is the programming, because the quality of their booking and their storytelling and their programming has kind of taken a major hit in recent months. Where it's like, it's not that it's loaded the show with bad ideas, it's just the execution is really bad in some places, and the pacing is really bad. Like, they'll do things like, a couple weeks ago they did this thing where Wardlow tore up Powerhouse Hobbs' car. I'm like, okay, not a bad idea, especially considering how their TNT title feud started with Wardlow's car getting broken into. It's like, okay, that kind of makes sense. There's a nugget of a good idea in there. But they didn't set up that Hobbs had this fancy car. They didn't set up that the car was important to Hobbs. And I think they introduced the car like right before Hobbs went out there, and then Wardlow tore it to shreds. So there was no time to really digest what was happening. And so none of it really worked, which is unfortunate because I like Hobbs and I like Wardlow, and that should have been an easy slam dunk thing to book, but it felt so rushed that you almost couldn't digest what you were seeing. And the meaning that it was supposed to have didn't resonate the way it should have. And it's things like that in AEW programming. I'm not sitting here and saying it's the worst wrestling show of all time. It's not. Lord knows. I lived through WCW in their darkest days. But it is a lot of these things would be avoidable if you just kind of like had... I know people don't like the term writers in wrestling. The Jim Cornette purists of the world don't like that term, but maybe have a script doctor, somebody who just goes over it with a red pen and kind of fixes little things here and there. That might help. I don't know. But in any case, we do have a pay-per-view this weekend, Double or Nothing 2023, and I have the card pulled up here. I'm looking at it. Might be a good card. AEW has a tendency with their pay-per-views to, like, even if it doesn't sound good, they typically deliver. Very rarely has there been a bad AEW pay-per-view. I can think of two. The one where Matt Hardy almost died, and the one where the barbed wire match with Omega and Moxley went horribly wrong. And it wasn't, even in those cases, it wasn't that the show was bad. It was more like it had really, really bad things that kind of influenced everyone's perception of the entire show, when it was just one really, really bad moment that kind of dragged the show down. But we'll see. A lot of stuff here. We got 9 matches. I'm a little surprised the trios titles aren't on there. But they've got 9 matches already, so it's probably a little loaded. First up, we've got a 6-man tag team match. Ethan Page and the Guns taking on the Hardy Boys and Hook in a 6-man tag. I really feel like this whole Hardys versus Ethan Page and the Firm thing should have been wrapped up with the broken Matt Hardy match that they did a couple weeks back. So this just feels kind of pointless and a way to get the Guns on pay-per-view. I like the Guns, and I like Ethan Page. I think they're coming along well as developing talents. I have my questions about bringing Jeff Hardy back and whether or not that was a good decision. But hey, this match also marks Hook's pay-per-view debut, which feels like a waste, because there was a point in time where Hook felt like a major kind of attraction that was developing for the company, and here he is, he's just kind of in a random 6-man match when I feel like his pay-per-view debut should be kind of a big deal. But I would imagine the babyfaces would win this match. I would be very surprised if they had Hook or the Hardys take a loss, especially against these three. But that's my take on the matter. Then from there, we have the Blackjack Battle Royal for the AEW International Championship. Orange Cassidy has been defending the belt every week, to the point that I get the story that they're telling where Orange is like he's working himself too hard, and he's getting hurt, and he's getting more desperate with each match, and it looks like he's going to lose, but then he pulls it out by the skin of his teeth. And here they're doing like this Battle Royal thing where he'll take on all comers. It's kind of like a less well-executed version of Crash Holly with the hardcore title heading into WrestleMania 2000, where the match was garbage. That Battle Royal match was horrible, and the finish was botched, but the lead-up to it was fantastic, where Crash Holly put the title up 24/7, and people were jumping him in airports and at Chuck E. Cheese, or whatever that place was, and also, in his hotel room and things like that. It was great, and the lead-up to it was great. Here, it's kind of like a less funny, less entertaining version of that, where Orange is defending the title against anybody and everybody, and it's become like this repetitive thing that's happening on Dynamite every week, where I feel like I'm watching the same match over and over and over again. And here we have, in the Battle Royal, it's Orange Cassidy, Aaron Solo, Powerhouse Hobbs, QT Marshall, and Ricky Starks, with 16 more men left to be named. So, I'm glad they didn't do a friggin' 20-man ladder match. That's kind of nice. I'm okay with that. But I would imagine Orange would keep the title here. Although, given the Battle Royal style format, this would be an opportunity to do like a shock title win with somebody you're not fully expecting. Like a Ricky Starks. That would be nice. I like Ricky Starks. I wish he would be promoted more. That's just my take. But yeah, then we have... The two women's titles are on the line. We've got Jamie Hayter defending the World Women's title against Toni Storm. I imagine Britt Baker will be in her corner, and I imagine Paige or Saraya and Ruby Riott will be in Toni's corner. I would put the belt on Toni Storm just to give the Outcasts some kind of momentum, because the way the story is played out, they've had very little momentum, and it's kind of looking like a shitty jobber version of the NWO. And it's not really working all that great, so it's like maybe put the belt on Toni Storm and see if you can make the group work better and create a stronger heel faction. So I would put the belt on Toni. That's just my take. But hopefully the match turns out really well. Then we got Jade Cargill defending the title against Taya Valkyrie once again for the TBS title, in a match where Taya will be allowed to use her finishing move, because her and Jade Cargill have the same finishing move, and they did that angle where Taya was banned from using it, but now she is not, and we've got this match coming up. We already got the match once, so I just kind of feel like, unless Taya is going to beat Jade, I don't see the point in doing this match again. And personally, I don't think Taya is the one that should beat Jade. Up to me, I would have Jade get the win, get her 60th win, and then start interacting with the world's women title competitors. That's what I would do. They've got to start working Jade in with the Britt Bakers of the world and the Toni Storms and those type. Because right now it feels like there's this weird divide in the women's division where Jade is kind of off doing her own thing, and whoever's fighting for the world women's title is off doing their own thing. And Jade is so dominant, it just feels weird that she wouldn't be involved with them in some capacity. So that's what I would do, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had Taya win the belt here, just because she already put Jade over once. And so from there, we've got the TNT Championship, Wardlow defending against Christian Cage in a ladder match. Christian Cage is one of the kings of the ladder match, and it's nice to have a one-on-one ladder match. That's always nice. In a day and age where you have 6 and 8 and 10 and 12-man ladder matches that are just completely, complete car wrecks where nothing means anything. It's actually refreshing to see a one-on-one ladder match. I don't know if Wardlow and Christian have the story to warrant a ladder match. It feels like they're doing it just because this is Christian's specialty, and I guess logistically it makes sense. This is the only way Christian would stand any kind of a chance against Wardlow, but Even with Luchasaurus in his corner, I would be very surprised if Christian won this. I think it would be a mistake, especially since Wardlow is already a 3-time TNT champion. I would have Wardlow retain here. He just won the belt back. Let him go in a dominant Goldberg-style run. And if they do, with all the rumors flying around about what they have planned for Wembley, if they want to do Wardlow versus Goldberg at Wembley, it's best to keep Wardlow winning up until that point. That's just my thought. He should be steamrolling people up to that point, if that's the ultimate goal there, but we shall see. And then we have the tag title match, FTR defending against Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal with Mark Briscoe as special guest referee. I like Jeff Jarrett. I think he's one of the more consistently entertaining parts of Dynamite. I know a lot of people online disagree with that. Jeff Jarrett carries with him a lot of negativity and mockery. The comments about he broke 1 million guitars, never sold a dime, and blah, 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 all this other stuff. I think Jeff Jarrett is one of the more consistent performers. And whenever I watch him, he's consistently entertaining and his stuff works. And I am completely down for this match. I think FTR is going to win. I also think the match is going to be Memphis as fuck, and it's going to be very, gimmick heavy and dog and pony show and things like that. But I think that type of match can work once in a while, so I'm completely okay with that. I'm just glad to see Jeff getting another run. If anything good came out of Ric Flair's last match, it's that people saw Jeff Jarrett and were like, oh yeah, he's a pretty good heel, and he ended up getting another run in AEW out of it. So, which I'm completely okay with, because Jeff is consistently good, and I will absolutely die on that hill. I have consistently been entertained by Jeff Jarrett. Not saying he's one of the greatest of all time or anything like that, but as far as somebody who delivers entertaining material on a show and has done for most of his career, I think Jeff is very, very good and gets underrated. And there are narratives surrounding him that aren't always fair. So it is kind of funny, though, to see FTR taking on a team of basically TNA rejects. But yeah, I think this match is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm picking FTR to retain. I guess let's talk about the Anarchy in the Asylum match, one of the bigger matches. I even think they may want to consider closing the pay-per-view with this match, because it is going to be such a car wreck, and I'm not overly sold on the world title match as a closer. We'll get to that. The Blackpool Combat Club, Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, and Wheeler Yuta, one of these things is not like the other, taking on the Elite, Kenny Omega, Matt and Nick Jackson, and Hangman Adam Page. The Anarchy in the Asylum matches, ever since they did the first one during the COVID era, have been consistently entertaining. They're wild, crazy, super, super fun matches. And I expect this one to be no different. I think because of the Blackpool Combat Club's tendency to go violent and blood-filled, this match is going to be very bloody, very hardcore, and if Omega versus Moxley in the cage from a few weeks back, which was very good, is any indication, this match is going to be wild and super, super violent for fans of that style of wrestling. And I think it could work. I would have the Blackpool Combat Club go over, because I'm a big fan of letting the heels go over, but again, we shall see. I'm expecting this to be one of the more entertaining parts of the show. And we also have another hardcore-style unsanctioned match, which should also probably main event the show, because if it's unsanctioned, you want to put that match on last so nobody's held liable. That's typically the tradition with unsanctioned matches, although not entirely, because Shawn and Triple H at SummerSlam 02 was unsanctioned and that didn't close, so whatever. But Adam Cole versus Chris Jericho. It's great to have Adam Cole back, whenever somebody's out for that long, and it looks like their career is in jeopardy and they're able to come back. I think that's, it makes for a nice story. And I think Jericho is a reliable opponent that can, be safe with him and also have a really good match with him. Some things in the build-up that they've done I'm not a huge fan of, like the segment with Adam being handcuffed and Britt being attacked with the Singapore cane. I think that would have carried a lot more weight if it was Jericho that hit her. Instead of Saraya. I don't know, to me, would have put a lot more heat on Jericho. Instead, it just kind of felt muted and less impactful. But again, that's just me. But I think this match could end up being really entertaining, and it really depends on how well Adam Cole is feeling and how much, he's wrestled a couple of times, but he's still working off that ring rust and getting back into the groove of things. So hopefully this is a nice kind of reintroduction of Adam Cole, baby, on pay-per-view, and he's able to move up move up and go on to grander things from there. And it looks like Adam Cole is going to be penned to be MJF's next challenger, which is acceptable. I can live with that. I think I've talked about everything. Yeah, that's everything except for the match that is probably going to main event. MJF versus Sammy Guevara versus Darby Allin versus Jungle Boy in a 4-way pillars match for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. Now, I'm not trying to disparage anybody when I say this, but during the build-up for this match, and whenever there have been given mic time, especially to Jungle Boy, but Darby Allin and Sammy Guevara as well, when they give those guys mic time, it becomes clear as day why MJF was the one of the 4 pillars that got the big boy belt, because he can talk circles around everybody, and the rest of them just don't hold a candle to him at all whatsoever. Like, they don't even look like they belong in there with him. The way he's able to project and get his point across and talk and get the people to hate him, he's light years ahead of the rest of those guys. And it showed. It's like there's a reason why these guys have never main evented before, and it's because they can't... Darby can connect with the audience, but I think there's a ceiling on Jungle Boy and Sammy Guevara, because it's like, oh yeah, they're going to be AEW World Champion someday. I'm like, really? You sure about that? Sure that's a good idea? I don't know, because I'm not feeling them in this role, in this main event spot. And it looks like they're going to close with this match, which I think might be a mistake. But anyway, the other thing going against this match is that I don't think anybody honestly expects MJF to drop the belt. I would be very surprised if he did, and not pleasantly so. It's just, I don't know, I would have MJF go over here and maybe set him up for something with Sting heading into Wembley, because I've heard people speculate that it's going to be Sting versus MJF in Wembley as Sting's retirement match, which I think would be great. At least not from a physical standpoint, because Sting, given his age, there's certain limitations, but from a spectacle standpoint, it'll be nice to see Sting's retirement, and to have him put over somebody like MJF would be fantastic. But yeah, this match just feels like a stepping stone to bigger things. I'm not overly excited for it. But that is the card for Double or Nothing 2023. They may announce a few more pre-show matches, maybe a trios title match at some point. But for right now, it looks like that's all we got. And, not the worst card in the world, but I'm not overly excited for it either. So that's kind of the state of AEW right now, unfortunately. I will say this, though. The angle they did where Don Callis turned on Omega, that got me. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And of course, my mind is racing. It's like they should have Don Callis join up with CM Punk and do that storyline. That's what they should do. And that'll lead to Punk and Omega somewhere down the road. That's the play, I feel like. Because Don Callis has got to get new clients, because, why would he dump Omega if he didn't have another great client lined up? It's kind of like Paul Heyman. He dumped Brock Lesnar to go with Roman Reigns, who was becoming, the tribal chief, the god. And it's Paul Bearer jumped Undertaker to join up with Mankind. You've got to have some kind of equal or better or perceived better that Don Callis could potentially join up with. And I don't think Takeshita, mispronounced his name, Takeshita is that guy. I know they built that up, and it's like, nah, I don't see that. CM Punk, on the other hand, you got something there with that one. So we'll see how that all plays out. But that was storyline-wise, that's the best thing AEW's done recently, where I was like, okay, you got me there. Let's see where this goes. And they haven't blown their load yet, or been too obvious about where they're going to go with it. So they have me intrigued with that. So I will give them credit for that. But right now, AEW's programming, it's kind of it's not the worst thing ever, but I'm not super excited for it either. Okay, and I have a special shout out here to Alex at Just Alex Central, a good friend of the channel and someone who's always helped me out since I've been on this platform, helping me out once again. So while I was filming this, he posted on Twitter that AEW has announced all of the participants for the 21-man Blackjack Casino Battle Royale for the international title. So I will go ahead and read all of those off here. You got Orange Cassidy, the champion, Butcher, Blade, Bandito, Commander, Lee Moriarty, Big Bill, Ari Daivari, Tony Nese, Chucky T, Trent, Kip Sabian, he's still there, Ray Phoenix, Penta El Zero Miedo, Swerve Strickland, Brian Cage, Ricky Starks, Jay White, Juice Robinson, Keith Lee, and Dustin Rhodes. So it looks like it's filled with the matches that they couldn't find room for on this card, like Swerve and Keith Lee or Jay White and Ricky Starks, they just put them in the Battle Royal as a way to kind of continue those feuds, which is not the worst thing in the world, but I'm not changing my prediction. I think Orange Cassidy retains the title here. That's just me. Okay, so moving right along from there, we've got WWE to talk about. There's a lot of stuff going on with them. And before I talk about Night of Champions, show that I'm not going to watch, because it's happening the same day as my mother's funeral, so, gonna be a little busy that day. My current thoughts on WWE programming, and there's been much talk since Vince came back into power, and since WrestleMania, like, there would be a downturn in the quality of WWE programming since those happened. Has there been a downturn? I would say overall, yes. It hasn't devolved into complete boring mush, or it hasn't devolved into the mindless nonsense that WWE has been when it's at its worst. However, I've noticed, because I don't watch Raw and SmackDown live, I'll watch it the next day on Hulu on DVR, and I noticed that when you skip the commercials and you skip the highlight packages and you skip the recaps and you skip anything that's not really interesting, like a match is going too long or something like that, you can get through Raw and SmackDown pretty quickly. There was a couple weeks back, SmackDown's a 2-hour show. I got past it, skipping over the filler, I got past it in less than an hour. So it just feels like a lot of WWE programming is skippable right now, and that's not the way it was from like SummerSlam to WrestleMania, where typically the quality was not the best WWE's ever been, but much higher than it had been in previous years. So it just kind of feels like they're going through the motions right now is the best way I'd describe it. You can count on Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn kicking off most shows. You can count on them having a ton of recaps. You can count on Brock Lesnar and Cody Rhodes having a brawl. They've had, I feel like I've seen them brawl like 9 times, and it just feels like kind of this, again, going through the motions type of thing. And that's my current feelings on WWE programming, where it's not as good as it was heading into WrestleMania, and it's kind of becoming repetitive and maybe even a little stale. But, we'll get past this show and we'll see if that trend continues moving forward. But we've got Night of Champions, one of the Saudi Arabia shows. I very rarely watch the Saudi shows. I think the last one I watched any footage of was the one that had Goldberg and Taker on it, and that was because the day it happened, people said it was one of the worst matches of all time. I was like, well, I gotta go check it out. And then I watched it, I'm like, yeah, it was one of the worst matches of all time. Go figure. But I'm typically not excited by the Saudi shows. I know a lot of people skip them because it's like, oh, it's Vince getting blood money and there's political reasons for not wanting to watch them. And all of that is understandable. My reasons for not watching them is that I feel like the atmosphere of the shows is always very strange. It feels like a bunch of people watching stuff that they don't understand and they don't get. And there's, I don't want to say they're forced to be there, but they seem obligated to be there rather than rabid WWE fans who are legit excited to be there. And I also find it very strange that this card that's happening in Saudi Arabia has 7 matches, and 3 of them are women's matches. When the Saudi shows typically, there was hesitancy to even have the women perform at Saudi Arabia. And when they finally did perform there, they had to come out wearing these full body suits, covering up their, all the good parts. And it just kind of looks weird and awkward, and it cuts into the enjoyment of those matches a little bit. Not that I'm saying I'm a dirty perv or anything like that. It just makes it look weird. And, the shows in general just have a very weird atmosphere to them, so I typically don't watch the Saudi shows. But I am going to preview the Night of Champions card, so let's jump right into it. So we've got, as I said, there are 3 women's matches. We've got Bianca Belair versus Asuka for the Raw Women's title. Why is Bianca the Raw Women's Champion when she's on SmackDown? I don't know. That's a confusing situation. The brand, and that's another thing about the programming, the brand split did no favors as far as promoting consistency and logic within the show. There's a lot of things going on right now that the brand split caused that just don't make any sense. And this is one of them, where it's like, why is Bianca the Raw champion when she's on SmackDown? Why haven't you resolved this issue? Why didn't you plan ahead and get the belt off of her first? Or something, anything? I don't know. Or why not rename the 2 titles into something else? So it's not the Raw and SmackDown titles. It's the the Grand Women's Championship and the Super Women's Championship. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there. I don't know. There are ways they could have addressed this, and they didn't. So, whatever. Bianca retains here, I think. Then we've got, for the SmackDown Women's title, from the competitor who's on Raw, Rhea Ripley defending against Natalya. No way in hell Natalya's winning that. Rhea retains. And we've got Becky Lynch versus Trish Stratus, a grudge match that has not had the best build-up on TV. I think they had some nice ideas, but some of the promos have come off as very forced and awkward, which is, not normal for Becky and Trish, but hey, it is what it is. I also was like, this is kind of a nice spectacle match because it's a star from the past working with the women's star of today. And it feels weird to have that match in Saudi Arabia. It's like, that feels like a waste because, again, they're not going to be able to dress how they want to for the match. They have to come out wearing those full body suits, and it's going to look awkward and weird. I would have rather, saved it for the next show or maybe SummerSlam or something. I don't know. It's just my take. Just my take. Seems like a wasted opportunity, but I think Becky wins here is my guess. Then for the Intercontinental title, we've got Gunther defending against Mustafa Ali. I wonder why Mustafa got that spot, given the location of the show. You know exactly why he got that spot, which is not the worst thing in the world. Play to the hometown crowd. I get that. But Gunther's going to retain here. There's no way in hell Mustafa Ali's walking out with that belt. Then we've got the three kind of main events. It's a kind of a triple main event situation. For the Undisputed Tag Team Championship, we've got Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn defending against Bloodline members Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa. I would be very surprised if Roman and Sikoa won here. I think Owens and Zayn retain, and then it causes further dissent within the Bloodline. That's my guess. Although, if the Bloodline wins, that could also create situations down the road where maybe we get Roman and Solo versus the Usos when the Bloodline fully splits. Something like that. There are things to do. And it's very interesting. This is much better than when I saw Backlash. The worst part of the show, I thought, was the six-man tag between the Bloodline and Sammy, Kevin, and Matt Riddle, because it felt like, I feel like we got the match at WrestleMania, and that felt bigger, and the stakes, there were no real stakes here, and this feels like kind of, eating reheated scrambled eggs almost. It didn't have the same energy or feel to it that the WrestleMania match did. But here it's like, oh, okay, this is a little interesting. This is something that they can do with moving down the road and have big storyline implications regardless of who wins. So that match is definitely interesting. We've got Cody Rhodes versus Brock Lesnar in a rematch, now with the added layer of Cody's broken arm playing into the drama of the match. And of course, Cody's going to work the match. Of course, he's going to sell the broken arm, and he's probably going to pull a Cena and come back and win. Despite that, although I would probably have Brock win, because it would make sense for Brock to beat the one-armed man, and then set up a third match, possibly for SummerSlam or the next event, where Cody wins for good. That would be my take. But I thought the first match they had was solid, but not great. And the finish basically confirmed it for me. It's like, okay, they're going to do rematches because it was very inconclusive finish. And I expect something similar here, but we'll see how that goes. And then we've got the tournament finals for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, the new World Heavyweight Championship. AJ Styles facing Seth freaking Rollins. Seth's going to win the belt. That would be my take. I've already made my case that I'm completely against having two world titles. I don't like it. And the fact that they're creating a second one after Roman's been champion for so long automatically makes this belt look like a consolation prize, so it's already getting off on a bad foot. Not a fan of it. I think less belts is better. One of my criticisms of AEW, it's one of my criticisms of New Japan, it's one of my criticisms of virtually everybody. There's too many belts. You can have less. It's okay to have less. You've turned these things into participation trophies. You need to stop. That's one way to resolve the women's title issue that WWE has right now. I'm like, hey, why not unify the belts and have the championship on both shows? Works for the tag division, just saying. And things were great when Roman was the only one holding the belt. I'm just saying, it works better. I don't know. But what do I know? I'm just a stupid, silly man. But yeah, that's Night of Champions. Not overly interested in the show, and I'm not going to watch it anyway. But we'll see how things play out. Like I said, that tag match could be very, very interesting. The rest, take it or leave it. And since I mentioned New Japan briefly, I think I should talk about what recently happened with Mercedes Money, the former Sasha Banks, who got injured working with Willow Nightingale, which AEW had to show on their programming. I mean, it would have been a missed opportunity if they didn't, where one of their girls beat Mercedes Money, which I definitely do not believe was the original intent, because it's so random as hell. It's like, why did Willow just come out of nowhere and beat Mercedes, who's one of the top female attractions outside of WWE? Say what you will about her. I thought her debut in New Japan was awful, poorly executed, and she's also shown that maybe she's the type that needs a writer to write her promos for her, because she's not very good on her own. But she is a star, she is an attraction, and she clearly got hurt, which is an unfortunate start to her kind of reinvention of herself, and it also potentially costs AEW an attraction for the Wembley show, because I would not be surprised if they were going to try and get her for that Wembley show as like an added bonus for everything else that they're planning for that show, because they need to make that show big. And I've already talked, it's like, get Goldberg, get Sting's retirement match on there, get CM Punk versus the Elite, get Mercedes Money, get Will Ospreay, do what you got to do to fill that stadium and please that crowd and placate that crowd. But I don't know how long she's going to be out or what the deal is, so we'll see. She might be fully ready to go by August time, so here's hoping. I wish her the best. Unfortunate whenever somebody gets hurt, but it did create a bit of a headline where it's like Willow Nightingale came out of nowhere and beat Mercedes Money, and then you watch the footage going, oh, that's what that wasn't planned. They just went with it because they had to. But still, it kind of, in a weird way, it kind of gave one of AEW's women a bit of a push. Now they can kind of promote Willow as somebody a little bit more meaningful in their division, so hopefully they can take that and turn it into a positive. I don't know. But that is all I have to say about that. There were two other shows happening this weekend. An NXT show, which I have not watched any NXT. The last NXT thing I watched was the WrestleMania weekend show from last year, when Mandy Rose was still there. That's it. I have not watched any NXT. So I'm looking over this card now to see if I recognize anybody or what's going on there. For the NXT Championship, we've got Carmelo Hayes defending against Braun Breaker. Okay. I don't think I've ever seen Carmelo. Maybe I have. I don't know. We've got, for the vacant NXT Women's Championship, we've got Lyra Valkyria taking on Tiffany Stratton. I've never seen either of them. A British rules match for the NXT Heritage Cup. What the fuck is that? Noam Dar versus Dragon Lee. I know who they are. Then we got a triple threat match for the NXT North American Championship. Wesley, I don't know who that is. Who is that? Yeah, I don't know who that is. Taking on Tyler Bate and Joe Gacy in a three-way. I know who they are. And then we've got Dragunov versus Dijak in the last man standing match. That match might actually be pretty cool. And then for the tag team championship, we've got Gallus, Mark Coffey, and Wolfgang versus the Creed brothers, Brutus Creed and Julius Creed. I do not know who the Creed brothers are. But yeah, this is, I don't know. I'm not going to watch the NXT show because I haven't watched any NXT in forever, which is so crazy to me because it's like, there was a time where I would have crawled across broken glass to see an NXT show, but now they're doing Battleground the same day as AEW. And if I'm even able to watch any wrestling on Sunday, we'll see how I'm feeling on Sunday, but if I'm able to watch any wrestling, I'm watching AEW. I'm not going to waste my time on NXT, and technically NXT is cheaper because it's on Peacock. I don't care. I'm not wasting my time on that. Screw that. And then we've got Impact Wrestling doing a show on Saturday, Under Siege. And I've actually been watching Impact Wrestling lately, which is kind of crazy, but it's something I've been doing, getting back into it a little bit. I'm kind of enjoying it. Some of the things, it's a nice basic show for the most part. Where I wish, if you gave Impact Wrestling kind of AEW's budget and roster, AEW would be amazing. Because I think the way Impact presents most of their storylines and builds most of their matches are generally, at least the stories are easier to digest and I can have an easier time following it, whereas AEW, they just constantly throw stuff at you and expect you to remember everything, and it gets a little bit much sometimes, but AEW doesn't really have that problem. Of course, that might also be because they have like 20 people on their entire roster, so it's easier to keep track of everyone. I don't know. But anyway, on this show, they've got On the pre-show, Joe Hendry, I believe in Joe Hendry, taking on Dirty Dango, which is a great name, for the Impact Digital Media Championship. I don't understand the point of that title, but whatever. I like Joe Hendry. Why is he not on the main card? I don't know. But anyways, we've got, for the Tag Team Championship, ABC, Ace Austin and Chris Bay, great name, taking on Subculture, Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster. I would expect ABC to keep this. Then we've got six-man tag team match, Rich Swann and Sami Callihan, and a mystery partner taking on The Design, a continuation of Sami's storyline with The Design. I cannot believe that Cody Deaner is a regular presence, and he's playing like an evil cult leader, because for years on like old school Spike TV, Impact TNA days, he was just a dirty, small hick guy, and now he's a cult leader. It's like, it's amazing how people transform. Kind of like Taylor Wilde. She was this plucky, lovable underdog back in the day, and now she's evil witch running her own group. And it's like, man, people get weird sometimes. The character development, it gets strange. Anyways, going on from there, we've got Trey Miguel taking on Chris Sabin for the X Division Championship. Chris Sabin's still going. He's Mr. X Division. He's held the belt more than anybody, right? I think that's right. We've got, for the Impact World Championship, we've got Deano Purrazzo taking on Jordan Grace. We've got Nick Aldis, the returning Nick Aldis, taking on Kenny King. I expect Nick Aldis to win that match. Great to see Nick Aldis back in some capacity, because, when I've been saying for years he's too good to not be featured anywhere. I still think Impact is too small for him, but it's better than nothing. So, yeah, we've got Nick Aldis, and hopefully he gets the world title at some point, because who else is going to hold it in Impact? More on that later. We've got the freshly debuted Trinity taking on Savannah Evans. Now, Trinity Fatu, former WWE star, came to Impact, and it actually got some headlines. It's the most attention I've seen Impact get in quite a while. And it was interesting, and some people are saying, oh, she's slumming it, big fish in a small pond, why is she going there? I'll say this, people can look down on Impact, but Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley, both went back to Impact after they'd kind of flopped in WWE. And they went to Impact and really kind of reinvented themselves and reestablished themselves. And then they went on to be in a world title match at WrestleMania, at WrestleMania 37. So this could be, and Cody Rhodes, he left WWE, and one of his first stops was TNA before he became what he ultimately is now. So this could be like a career resurgence for Trinity. So don't sell it short. Just because she's going to Impact, some people think, oh, she's slumming it or whatever. She might be able to completely reinvent herself and become a more worthwhile star that can make it again in WWE. So we'll see. Nick Aldis, even though I just said it's like, he might seem a little big there considering what he was doing in NWA, but it's like, hey, it's better than nothing, and maybe he can get more eyeballs on him and wind up in AEW or WWE someday. Who knows? We'll see. Got to start somewhere. Then we have a six-way match to determine the number one contender for the Impact World Championship. It's Alex Shelley, Eddie Edwards, Frankie Kazarian, Jonathan Gresham, Moose, and Yuya Uemura. I would think Frankie would win this because they did all those interviews, those sit-down interviews with him, and it feels like he's being set up for a title shot. That's just my take, but we'll see. I think I've talked about everything but the title match. Steve Maclin defending against PCO in a no disqualifications match. I know Josh Alexander was the Impact champion, longest reigning Impact champion for a while. Then he got hurt, and which necessitated the move to Maclin. And I'm just like, are these like the best guys to hold the title? I don't know. Like, Josh Alexander seems a little bland to me. Excellent technical wrestler, seems a little bland. Maclin, better on the mic probably, but still a little bland. I'm like, you don't got anybody else that can hold that belt. Again, it's like, give it to Frankie probably at this point. Give it to Nick Aldis. Those should be the guys that should probably get it. I understand wanting to create a new face of the company to try and like freshen up the brand and everything, but I don't know. I don't see much in Maclin, but that's just me. PCO's a lot of fun. He could make a fun match out of this, but we shall see. But yeah, that is all the wrestling stuff. I think I've talked and rambled and previewed enough things, so hopefully you all enjoyed that. But with all that said, now let's get into the Godzilla stuff. Now, to address some of the drama surrounding the new Godzilla vs. Kong movie, My understanding, because I jumped onto the train late, is that online reviewer Mr. H attended an early screening of Godzilla vs. Kong with incomplete special effects and proceeded to break his NDA and basically leak a basic story outline of the film online. Now, Legendary Pictures and Warner Brothers shut that down immediately, pulled the video, and it caused a bit of an online shit show where he revealed even more about the film and things like that. And I don't know all the details, I just know that I saw kind of the after effects of it and all the reaction to it and everything that was going on. And I don't want to disparage a fellow YouTuber here on the platform, but I will say, breaking an NDA, not a smart move, or revealing specific details about a film after you've signed an NDA. Always best to err on the side of caution and don't do that. That's my personal take on it. I attended an early screening of Godzilla King of the Monsters back in 2019, and I didn't sign anything because the movie was coming out, a week and a half, 2 weeks later, so who cared? But I could have spoiled the entire movie, and I didn't because I was like, I don't want Warner Brothers jumping down my throat. So it's like best not to do it, even though I didn't sign anything. I figured, well, let's err on the side of caution and not piss off the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that could destroy me with their legal team. But I'd rather not risk it. So, but that caused a bit of an uproar online. Apparently, he's kind of flipped out over it and everything and kind of made enemies left and right. And there have been some reactions to what he said about the film itself, Godzilla vs. Kong, The New Empire, Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. There's no verses anymore because they're friends now. And there have been some reactions to the leaks online, and a lot of it negative, because reportedly, according to Mr. H, the movie is a lot more over-the-top and sillier. And this has got some fans up in an uproar that's like, oh my god, it's a joke now, and where's our serious Godzilla and all this other stuff. And that's kind of been the reaction to it. My take, first of all, I don't know the specific details because I'm deliberately avoiding all spoilers. So I don't know what was said, specifically what was reported. I do know that the identity of the mysterious evil orangutan that was in the teaser, he's revealed that. But I don't know the name or anything like that. So I want to stay as spoiler-free as possible until it's time for me to see that movie next year, 2024. Assuming it meets that date, because historically the MonsterVerse films always get pushed back. But we'll see. But I'm avoiding all spoilers, so I don't know exactly what was said, so I can't comment on any of the specifics. What I will say is that if this film is kind of goofy and over the top, I kind of like goofy over-the-top Godzilla. I mean, I like a lot of the 70s films. I like the 90s films where things got a little bit more experimental and crazy. I like, I like a lot of the Millennium films for as silly as some of those got. So, and every Godzilla series kind of starts this way, except for the Millennium films, which was pretty much goofy nonsense from the very beginning. But Godzilla series always starts grounded and serious, 1954, 1984, 2014 film, and then it kind of goes crazy as they add more sequels to it. In the original series, by movie 6, we had aliens, and then by the 70s, it was just no holds barred, anything goes. And if you look at the 90s, that entire decade was filled with like, okay, what crazy thing can we do now? And like, let's do time traveling, and let's do a space Godzilla, and let's do magical psychic, there were psychics that generated magical energies that the monsters could feed off of, and all sorts of other weird stuff that this series has done over the years. In the Millennium films, black hole gun. That's the one I always go back to. It's like they invented a black hole gun. And I've always kind of reasoned it, whenever you see, like, situations like this and crazy weapons and sci-fi elements introduced into the Godzilla movies, I always reasoned it, and this is how I've always thought about it as a kid, necessity is the mother of invention. So when giant monsters run around in the real world, it's like, oh my god, what do we do? You start inventing things to help live in a world with giant monsters, and that's why in the 2014 film, it's all tanks and planes and normal things you would expect to see. And then by Godzilla vs. Kong, they've got magic spaceships that can go into the Hollow Earth and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. So I'm on board with crazy. That's not necessarily a defense of Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. I'm not defending it because I haven't seen the movie. Literally all I know about it is the title and the teaser, which showed the new villain. That's it. That's literally all I know. So this movie could very well be terrible. The track record of the MonsterVerse has been fairly consistent. I've enjoyed all the MonsterVerse films up to this point. I'm very excited for the Skull Island animated show. I saw the teaser for that, and I'm like, that looks like something that would be right up my alley. I'm excited for the Apple Plus TV show, and I'm excited for this movie. I want to see where it goes, but we literally know, I know almost nothing. Now again, I don't know what was said in these spoilers, in these leaks, which people are assuming is true, because Legendary went to the effort of pulling Mr. H's video, so I'm like, okay, so it must be true, which is a fair conclusion to reach, all things considered. But I'm not going to cast any judgments until I see the film itself, or until I see something in the marketing that gives me concern. Like when Rise of Skywalker was coming out and I heard the Emperor's laugh, I was like, uh-oh, that's the problem. And it was the problem, but again, we'll just wait and see how that all goes. But it caused a bit of a storm online on Twitter with fans like reacting and wanting to, bite Mr. H's head off for, revealing the entire movie and breaking his NDA and all sorts of other things, and he was blocking people left and right. And then some people were like, oh my god, they made a goofy Godzilla movie. And I'm like, yeah, because that's never happened. Yeah, there's never been a silly Godzilla movie. I want to make this perfectly clear. Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, one of the most divisive Godzilla movies in the series, is a personal favorite of mine. That's where I'm coming from. I love goofy, silly Godzilla once in a while. It's kind of like, I'm the same way with Star Trek, where it's like, look, Star Trek, I like serious science fiction, I like a lot of the themes and ideas, but every once in a while I like a Tribbles episode. Every once in a while I like, one of my favorite episodes of DS9 is the baseball episode. That was so good. It's just the characters playing baseball. And I'm like, you know what, this is the best episode of the entire show. I love it. And every once in a while it's nice to have something a little silly, a little goofy. So that's my take on the matter. I have not lost hope in Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire yet or anything, but again, I haven't read the leak, so I don't know what was said. But I'm going to wait until I see the film or I see something in the advertising that gives me concern. So I'm not ready to condemn the film yet until I see it. But I think I've ranted and raved long enough. Thank you again, everybody, for watching. Again, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new content. But that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching, and I will see you all later.